I want to welcome you to this event. This event is organized as part of the activities of the ELECTRON project. So I want to welcome you, all of you, in this activity. So we have split this activity into two main parts. The first part, we have invited some external stakeholders from policy stakeholders and also policy regulation, and also stakeholders related to some other projects related to cybersecurity. And the second part is going to present the work that we have done in ELECTRON. So here is just a minute to change the screen. So here is the brief agenda. So the first session is about European policy and regulatory landscape views. The second is the view from the other project. We have invited 4 other projects. And the third session, which under the name ELECTRON View, we have first a brief overview of the ELECTRON and the 4 pillars of ELECTRON, then a short presentation of the 4 use cases, and then some selected demos. So first, I would like to invite Grigori Dimitrescu, that is going to give an overview of the session regarding the European policy and the regulatory views.
Okay. Thank you very much, Theodoros, for the introduction. So I have the pleasure to introduce this first session on ELECTRON, on policy and regulatory landscape for energy cybersecurity in Europe. We are very honored to have 2 speakers with us, Dr. Konstantinos Mourinos from ENISA and Dr. Svante Westphal from the US Mannheim in Germany, representing EISAC. And just to give a brief context, we wanted to have this session to go a bit beyond the activities in the project and to try to reach out and understand a bit what is out there in terms of regulation, in terms of concern of energy operators regarding this increasing regulatory environment, and how we can solve this through mainly through technology-based solutions. So that would be my brief comment. Regarding the logistics of the sessions, I would kindly ask the presenters to present their ideas in about 20 minutes, and we will have time after each presentation for 2 or 3 questions. So without further ado, I would be like to give the floor to Mr. Mourinos for the presentation on NIS2. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation, Grigori. I will be happy to share with you the developments concerning the NIS directive. Please confirm if you see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. So my name is Konstantinos Mourinos. I'm a cybersecurity expert and I work for ENISA. I'm the key contact point of ENISA, one of the key contact points of ENISA with the NIS cooperation group of the NIS directive. And I'm also project management of energy security, cybersecurity related projects. Before I start with the presentation of the NIS directive, a few words about ENISA. ENISA is the European Cybersecurity Agency of Europe. It's located in 3 places, 2 in Greece, Heraklion and Athens, and 1 in Brussels. Mainly our activities are divided in 4 divisions, 4 sectors. First, ENISA is advising European Commission on cybersecurity policy, and our presentation will focus today on this domain. We also deal with trusted solutions and certification and standardization. ENISA is a key player in developing certification schemes, European cybersecurity certification schemes. Also, we are in close collaboration with member states in order to support the member states in increasing their capacity building to help them develop their own cybersecurity strategies, organizing cybersecurity exercises. And finally, we are also a key player in the operational collaboration between member states. ENISA runs as a secretariat of the CSERT network and the Cyclone, that are two key bodies that have been groups that have been created by the NIS directive. Before I start the presentation on the NIS directive, I would like to say that, the NIS directive is nothing less than a tool, an instrument that the European legislator has created in order to help Europe to face the cyber threats against the European critical sectors. And I would say that the NIS directive is the key legislation around European critical infrastructure cybersecurity. Of course, there are other complementary legislations. However, the key and the most prevailing one is the NIS directive. Here you see a list of the cyber threats that we have currently noticed, and not only for the energy sector, but also for the critical sectors in general. Number one threat against the European networks is the ransomware, followed by supply chain attacks, which, according to a report of ENISA, supply chain attacks, especially against software, will become the number one threat by 2030. Of course, in the calendar, in the agenda of the cyber threats, there is always the war from Russia against Ukraine, which has triggered a lot of attacks against European telecommunication and energy and other networks as a result of the aggression between Russia and the European Union. Also, there are other important threats that we have noticed, and we publish a report every year, and we call it the ENISA Threat Landscape Report, and I invite you to download and read. Now, what is the NIS directive? As I mentioned before, is the key legislation of Europe for the protection of Europe's cybersecurity critical sectors. And NIS directive, I would say it's an instrument which focuses on the resilience, how to protect the networks and from the outages. Mainly, the NIS directive focuses on the prevention and detection instead of being more active in the area of active cybersecurity. So, as you can see from my slide, the primary focus is on outages and major incidents. So this is why the focus of the measures proposed by the NIS directive are on redundancy, failover backups, and in general, the prevention and the detection of cybersecurity incidents. In general, I would say that on the right-hand side, the triangle you see, the triangle reflects the logic of NIS directive, especially when we are talking about the level of entity corporate cybersecurity, which invites the entities to perform a risk assessment, and based on the results of the risk assessment to apply some security measures, and then after the application of the measures, the entity should monitor the incidents taking place, and in case that there are incidents, then again the risk assessment should follow, so that the entity improves its cybersecurity and take new measures that are based on the lessons learned from incidents which took place. Although the fact that most of the critical infrastructures are owned by private sector, I would say that the NS Directive is a partnership between national authorities and critical infrastructure owners. However, we need to do a lot more in order to enhance the collaboration with the private sector. Important to keep in mind about the NIS2, it's a directive, which means that each member state has to transpose to the national legislation the directive. So this creates, this leaves room for different interpretations for the NIS directive among the different member states. So often multiple authorities implement the NIS directive in a different way. So this was one of the reasons that we moved from the NIS1 to the NIS2. NIS2 is the development of NIS1. However, the main focus remains the resilience, the focus on preventing the outages and the significant incidents. However, I would say that we have in the NIS2 three main pillars, which address the member states on the left-hand side. In the middle, it's about the corporate, the businesses, and on the right-hand side is how the information is exchanged among the private and the public sector, as well as between the different member states and the ENISA and the European Commission. So with the red color, you see what is new in the NIS2 when compared with NIS1. For example, in the first pillar, we see that the NIS2 introduces the need for the member states to create a coordinated vulnerability disclosure framework. For the companies, the incident reporting and the security measures exist in the NIS1. The new element here is the accountability for the top management for non-compliance. And the right-hand side, in the cooperation information exchange pillar, you see a lot of new stuff where ENISA plays a significant role, especially with regards to Cyclone and the CSAT network, where ENISA is the secretariat, and also the creation of a pan-European vulnerability registry, together with the registry for digital infrastructure entities for Europe. And last but not least, every 2 years, ENISA will be responsible for issuing a report concerning cybersecurity in Europe. What is new in the NIS directive? 2 more sectors have been added, more entities, new methods of selection and registration, who is in scope and who is out of scope of the NIS2. New incident identification deadlines. Now we have a 3-phase incident reporting. The minimum reporting period is the 72 hours after the realization of an incident. And of course, we have some extra cybersecurity requirements on top of what existed in the NIS1. Which entities are covered? With the red color, you see the new entities, not, I would say that are quite a lot. with the blue one, with the blue color, you see the entities which are already under the scope of the NIS 1 and the sectors under the NIS 1. And with the color, with the red color, you see the new entries. And as you can see, for the energy, we have additions concerning district heating, hydrogen, and electricity markets, production, aggregation, and demand response energy storage. So new sectors means a lot of new work for the competent authorities and for the supervision of these entities, which is divided in two important categories. In the NIS directive, we're speaking about essential entities. You can consider these essential entities are entities working and functioning in the sectors which could traditionally are considered as critical ones, like energy, health, water supply, transport, etc. For these entities, there is a more increased, I would say, supervision regime, which covers both the periods before an incident and after an incident. So this is why these entities are under ex ante before or ex post after an incident supervision regime. And they are subject to a more closer supervision regime. On the contrary, we have the important entities which are more or less the entities which are not in the regime of essential entities. You saw in the previous slide, we had the manufacturers, other entities for TLDs, and so on and so forth. So here we have a less strict supervision regime, and which is focusing only to the ex post supervision after an incident. And a few timelines before I close with the NIS2 directive presentation. 17th of October is the deadline, the big deadline of transposition. The member states have to transpose the NIS directive by 17th of October. Also on the 17th of October, the Commission should issue implementing acts, secondary legislation. You consider implementing acts as secondary legislation, which will apply automatically to all member states without the need of transposing them, on security measures and incident reporting. But it will focus only on specific types of entities, such as trust service providers, cloud providers, managed service security providers, managed security service providers, etc. And on the 17th of April next year, the member states should establish the lists of essential important entities which have been identified in each member state, and they are considered to be under the scope of the NIS2. Before closing my presentation, I would like also to present another product of ENISA, which relates to the NIS2 implementation. We call it the NIS Investment Report. As you can see from the slide, since 2020, ENISA is collecting information concerning the implementation of the NIS directive of operators of essential services and digital service providers following the NIS 1 terminology. Now with NIS 2, we have different terminology for essential entities and important entities. So we collect information from all across Europe. And you see we started with 251 participants in the survey that we do. And now for this year, we had 1,080 participants from all sectors of the NIS directive. And we try to collect some information concerning the implementation of the NIS directive. Here you see the key findings, which is the fact that Europe is a little bit behind concerning cybersecurity when compared to other areas, geographical areas such as Asia and America. However, we see that the entities which are under the NIS directive are a bit higher than the averages of Europe, which means that leads us to the assumption that the NIS directive is the key driver behind the investments cybersecurity in Europe. However, at the moment, the European entities do not see the cybersecurity as a competitive advantage, as a race to the top characteristic of their business. So this is why they increase, they try at least to increase the investments on cybersecurity when compared to IT investments. You see, we have a 7.1%, an increase of 0.4% as compared to 2021. Here you see some cybersecurity budgets according to the different sectors. Energy is a little bit lower than the average. We have a 5% percentage of the IT investments, security investments compared to IT investments, when at the same time the average is 7.1. And concerning the OT security, you see the question here, what was the organization estimated spending on operational technology? You see the different numbers across Europe, where we see that Poland is Poland is the leading in spending on operational technology, according to the data collected, followed by Germany. Sorry, this is that I have to finish my presentation now. Concerning the SOC, Security Operations Center, again, we see that there is some interest from the operator, for the energy operators to invest on SOCs. 52, they claim that they do it together with IT, and while the 32 they mention that they don't get services from a SOC. Before going to the conclusions, what are the challenges ahead? New tasks, as I said, new tasks and new sectors bring and several changes bring a lot of new work for the competent authorities, as well as for European Commission and ENISA. We have twice as many sectors and more companies in each sector under the NIS2. The evolving cybersecurity threat landscape, we have artificial intelligence, we have new threats that at the moment we have to face. So the NIS and the authorities should be vigilant to adapt to this threat landscape. And the NIS directive provides the background to do that. And of course, the fact that a big challenge is that the fact that we have different sectorial policy initiatives like GDPR, DORA, and the Energy Network Code, which is recently adopted, that all these legislative initiatives should be coordinated in order to avoid the overlaps. And I will conclude by saying that what I said in the first slide, that the primary leverage for cybersecurity developments and the primary regulation for Europe is for cybersecurity is the NIS directive. Plays a significant role for investments and for the improving the cybersecurity for not only for the energy sector but all critical sectors in Europe. We need to increase the investments and not only because of the regulation. However, we need to convince them, the entities, that they have to invest on cybersecurity in order to increase the quality of the services they deliver. And the coexistence of multiple regulatory initiatives is a challenge that we have to face in the coming years. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm available for possible questions.
Okay, very much, Dr. Munoz, for the presentation. Now, if there are any questions from the audience or online in the chat, please.
Yes, if for the online audience, if you have any questions, just put it in the chat, and then we will give you rights to open your microphone and ask the questions, okay? Just to facilitate the discussion. Right, please. You have a question, please.
Okay. We have one question from.
Okay, just circulate this microphone. Okay, just my question. My name is Christopher Shtansky from ATOS, from Eviden. It's a company, but it's just to know, within the framework of the Horizon Europe, how do you see the role of all these plethora of activities funded with the support of the NIS2 directive, or is there any relationship that you would like to comment on this?
I didn't hear very well the question. Sorry, can you repeat?
In the Horizon Europe framework, right, there are a number of initiatives, so-called EU-funded projects, which strive to somehow leverage cybersecurity technologies in the sector. Is there any specific role they can be in the support of this NIS2 directive?
I wouldn't say that the NIS2 directive is an instrument for innovation, for funding research projects, etc. And NIS primarily targets the member states as well as the companies who are implementing cybersecurity. However, Europe has adopted other legislative initiatives towards this direction, like the legislation for the European the ECCC, the Competence Center, where there are, if I'm not mistaken, 4 billion of 4 billion euros from Europe shared with the member states, and each national competence of center is responsible for disseminating its own part to the national research centers. Also, there is this Solidarity Act, which is not yet adopted. However, there are provisions for the creation of European reserve of trust service providers, where these providers will be funded, sponsored by European budget, in collaboration with European Commission and ENISA, to offer specific services to competent authorities, to private companies.
Okay. I think it was clear enough for me. Yes, thank you. It was good enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are other questions, I think we have time for one more question. Okay. If not, I would have a curiosity more. So you mentioned that the member states have less space for personalization, let's say, of NIS2 compared to NIS1. Could you comment a bit on the status of the transposition in various member states, and if the national rules, expect the national rules to be challenging for various companies that operate across borders, so to have to comply?
So the first is concerning the transposition. The second, what?
Yes, concerning the transposition, the status of transposition, and concerning the differences between the member states, if this would be a challenge to the various energy companies.
Concerning transposition, currently there are only 2 member states that have concluded the transposition. It's Croatia and Belgium. Of course, many of them are expected to be close to the finalization by the deadline. We do not expect that all member states will meet the deadline of 17th of October, however. There are some challenges that the member states face, like the creation of a uniform approach concerning penalties, for example. Also, the interpretation of what sectors and what cases could be in scope and out of scope. The typical example is the one that is mentioned by Germany, for example, whether a small bakery which has a number of solar panels will be included or excluded or be in scope of the NIS directive or not. So this means that each member state will provide different interpretation on what will be in scope and what out of it. Now, concerning the challenges implementation from the corporate, from the businesses, what I have noticed after discussions, I would say that for the energy companies, which in the majority of them were in the NIS1, they didn't mention challenges concerning the incident reporting and the security measures because they are already familiar with this. The only challenge, or so to speak, they need more time, so to speak, is this issue with the top management responsibility and how they will make it more known into the business, into the core, to the entity, and the organization of awareness raising in the business concerning the NIS directive. This was at least my feeling so far for the energy sector.
Thank you very much. And just to wrap it up, I see there's a question in the chat from Mr. Soare, who represents the Romanian national regulator in the field of energy. Just a brief comment if ENISA is satisfied by the current level of implementation of NIS2.
ENISA has no role in giving satisfaction or not, because we are not European Commission. European Commission is the one who is a legislator. We are just here to support the member states. Now, as always, there are member states which are more advanced, the big ones, France, Germany, etc., and the other ones which are benefited out of this because they learn from their experience. And this is the role of ENISA, to be a hub of knowledge sharing. So I would say, it depends on the way that you see it. If you compare the cybersecurity level that Europe has currently, it's better than the one we had before the NIS directive. So this means that, yes, the NIS directive is a leverage. Now, if we would have make it better, always there is room for improvement.
Thank you very much, Dr. Molinos. It was a pleasure to have you in this meeting. And now I think we can move forward. I would like to give the word to Dr. Vespal.
I would be very interested to hear and listen my good friend Swan.
Okay, so Dr. Westphal is Director of Institute of Safety and Security at the US Mannheim, and she also leads the EU Initiatives Task Force in EISAC, and we believe she has also the perspective of the utilities in this topic. Please.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Am I audible and can you see my screen? Just to make sure.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Perfect. Well, I'm here on behalf of the European Energy ISAC. I don't have many slides presenting the EE ISAC, but I'll share the link to our website after my talk. So if you want to dig in and have some further research on what we do, feel free to do so. We would gladly connect via LinkedIn or other channels to talk to you. So the European Energy Information Sharing and Analysis Center is an information sharing in a network of trust. That's like the basic idea of what we do. And today I want to talk about the network code on cybersecurity, the NCCS. It's kind of hot off the press. So I'm going to present what's in there and what it means for the electricity sector. I also planned a little deep dive into a comparison with the NIS2, so what it actually means and where it's matching, but where we have some differences as well. So first question, where does it come from? It's a Commission delegated act, and it was led by the European Union Commission Director General of Energy. And it was foreseen already under the electricity regulation of 2019 and also in the EU Action Plan of 2022. It was drafted by an expert group composed of member states, national regulators, ESA, ENTSO-E, and the European Commission on electricity policy. And the drafting started as early as in July 2021. So that's quite a time ago, you might think. But indeed, I mean, there was the NIS2 directive coming up and other regulations, and we wanted to make sure that it's a comprehensive part, which is not doing the same stuff over again, but it actually makes sense together with the other regulations. So it took a little longer, but I think what we came up with was really, really good in the end. So it was designed by electricity stakeholders together with cybersecurity experts, and it is for the electricity sector. So it's a very, very specific regulation, and this is where it highly differs from the NIS2 directive, which is really important as well, but it's really only for the electricity sector. The current status is that, as I said, hot off the press, the European Commission adoption was on March 11th this year, and it was under scrutiny and objection by the European Union Parliament, but has now been published in a EU journal on May 24th. And it states so in the framework, in the network code, it is to enter into force within 20 days of the publication. So that gives us another 2 weeks, I think. The main question usually is like, why do we do all this work, right? Why is it there? Why do we need this? The problem is, and I think Kostas already stated a little bit on this, that we have a growing threat landscape. And our grid, our power grid, is getting more and more digitalized and connected, and such we have a growing attack surface and also international geopolitical instability. And it all works together. Probably I'm preaching to the choir here, but it makes attacks more likely. And at the same time, we have a growing attack surface across borders. And the regulations we have so far are all, as we have stated and even had it in the discussion, down to member states. But for the electricity grid, this is just not enough. We need to prepare for cyber attacks cross-border. And this is why also the EEISAC contributed to the NCCS, right? We wanted to make sure that everything which goes cross-border, that we can protect ourselves against cyber attacks, or if they are there, then that we can react swiftly and quickly, so it doesn't come to cascading effects across borders. And so the EEISAC provided feedback pretty early on to the ESA framework guidelines. So this is where it started as early as June 21. We also gave feedback to the ENTSO-E and EU DSO public consultations and feedback then to the final European Commission proposal. And we are very happy that some of our statements made it into the NCCS. So what's actually in the scope? Who's in there? Yes, stating the obvious, obviously it's nominated electricity market operators, so everyone in there. But it's not everyone in there, but it's really all those who have cross-border electricity flows. right? This is the difference. It's really important that everyone who has something to do with cross-border electricity flows is somehow connected to the NCCS. But it also has in its scope organized marketplaces. So those who not actually transfer the energy, but just regulate the market for it and the money flows. Also, critical ICT service providers are in the scope. And this might be of interest for some in the audience, I think. Balancing responsible parties are quoted to be in the scope, and operators of recharging points, as well as managed security service providers. So yes, also cybersecurity service providers and managed service providers, ICT service providers, they're in there. And I guess, at least from my perspective, coming from academia, I have the feeling, the gut feeling that some of them still don't really know what's waiting for them. But we'll tell them soon enough, I guess. When it comes to the objectives, I already talked a little bit about the overarching goals, but the critical objectives are prevent, detect, and respond. You already are familiar with the scheme, I guess. But the main objective is to have a proper risk assessment cross-border and a very sector-specific cybersecurity requirements. So the NIS2 is not really sector-specific. It's best practices. It's everything which is required to have an organization having a good, resilient setup. But what is in here in the NCCS is a sector-specific, specifically for the energy and electricity sector. It also focuses on the key stakeholders in electricity, also those authorities which are interconnected here. So it has a slightly different target group. And it's also about security governance frameworks, to giving governance, especially for those where governance is kind of complicated because it's going cross-border. And the main idea is that we can react to electricity incidents wherever they come from and however they come from, and that we can streamline communication also to cybersecurity authorities, but also between each other, between all those stakeholders who might be impacted. So the NCCS has 8 building blocks, I'd call them, so 8 chapters. The first one gives general provisions, the scope, definitions on competent authorities, who's actually targeted here. So we have a definition of what it's meant to be, and the scope I already presented, but there's a little more, so feel free to read it. It's all out there. The second is kind of one of the most important ones from my perspective, which is really about the risk assessment and the identification of the relevant cybersecurity risks. And this is something which is also in the NIS2 directive as one of the core parts, but it is again here stated very obviously, and it's the risk assessment, which is cross-border again. And it's a risk assessment which is very wholesome, and specifically for the energy sector, which then leads to a common electricity cybersecurity framework. So this is still in the doing. And the framework is it contains initial minimum and advanced cybersecurity controls. This is what still needs to be defined. But no later than 24 months after the adoption of the controls referred to in the first points there. And the establishment of cybersecurity management system then, the CSMS, should be based on this. So these are 2 steps which now are in transition, that we have a cybersecurity framework which holds up for all the needs the electricity sector has, and a CSMS, so a comprehensive cybersecurity management system, which kind of entails more than we already know it, information security management system, and also holds true to the fact that we need to operate between nation states, between members, between various associations, and not just one. And as soon as the CSMS is published, those minimum and advanced cybersecurity controls should also comply the supply chain, and we have a specific chapter also on cybersecurity security procurement recommendations. This is also targeting the supply chain, but it also gives guidance on use of European cybersecurity certification schemes for procurement and of ICT products, ICT services, and processes. The fifth chapter is on information flows, cyber attacks, and crisis management, and you see it's already getting familiar with the chapters we find in the NIS2 directive. But again, here the information flow is highly targeted on information sharing between various entities and competent authorities towards various groups. It's really much bigger than in information sharing from one entity, one company, to its nation state and the representatives there, but it's really in between all the necessary stakeholders in order to prevent cascading effects. There's going to be rules on information sharing. Some are already in there, which also entails something like if a competent authority receives information related to a reportable cyber attack, who does it need to report to, who, like for each entity like CSIRTs, TSOs, EU DSOs, or the entity ENSO, like who is reporting to whom, which kind of information, that all is defined in there. And the role of high impact and critical impact entities as regards to information sharing, especially the CSOCs, how and which kind of information should be shared here. Also, the detection of cyber attacks and the handling of related information. Like, it's on the one hand, it's definitely the need to know principle on information sharing, but on the other hand, we need as much information as possible in order to really be able to prevent large-scale attacks. When we already see it in one facility, we might stop the attack in others. What is also in there is the obligation to test overall cyber attack management procedures at least once a year, and crisis management, and also not only within the facility, but between various facilities. And there are cybersecurity crisis management and response plans, which need to be there, and the capability and the ways on how to jointly create an ad hoc cross-border crisis coordination group if something happens. It also has some ideas about the cybersecurity early alert capabilities for the electricity sector. So you see the information part is really important for us as an EEISEC. That's why I delved much deeper into this topic. But there's a lot in there because it's exactly what we do to try to give a hands up to all our members across nation-state borders to be able to ward off, because cyber criminals unfortunately do not recognize nation-state borders and stay within theirs. The next chapter is on electricity cybersecurity exercise framework, which means that there should be cybersecurity exercises at the entity level, but also at a member state level. And also it envisions regional or cross-regional cybersecurity exercises. And there is a second part on the protection of information. So principles for the protection of exchange information, confidentiality of information, and that everything which is aggregated on a large scale basis should be anonymized, rules for this. There's a large idea, like big ideas behind this, how to make it possible to have a good information exchange and at the same time not providing like the biggest honeypot for criminals in case they get their hands on it. It's a very delicate problem. And a very interesting problem, and I think the NCCS is really trying to solve that problem. So, as I said, I wanted to focus on the comparison with the NIS2 directive, so going a little bit into the content of those regulations. In terms of risk management, when we look at the NIS2, there's a restriction to a defined scope, which is no longer applying. So everyone who's already run an ISMS could define a scope, but with the NIS2, everyone who falls under this restriction is no longer possible. Same here, obviously. And for me, it's important that there should be a holistic view of the entity and the company. So it's not only the IT, which is screened, but also the OT. I think Kostas already showcased this, but also IoT and IIoT. And this obviously is a lot more work than before. And what is also different from before is that the implementation of the measures must be proven. So you're not only audited by, okay, yeah, I saw my risks and I defined the measures, but it's whether you actually put them into place. And you have to showcase concepts and procedures for evaluating the effectiveness of the risk management measures. And what is now the responsive part of the NCCS is that all this must be done also additional to what those entities have to do on the NIS2 level to have a risk assessment of their infrastructure cross-border and also multi-stakeholder wise. When it comes to incident response and reporting, we have, with the NIS2 directive, the request that all affected parties must report and register within 3 months of the publication or national legislation. Attacks with significant effects must be reported. There's the reporting hours. I will not go into detail here. And then the national CSIRT must report to a European CSIRT. The question here is like, for the NCCS and the electricity sector, we probably need different lines of reporting. And I want to put this out for discussions because we need to be much faster and much quicker because we're that critical. Also, with the part of incident response and detection, the NIS2 foresees critical institutions that they need to have an intrusion detection system, that they have to have a running business continuity management and run business impact analyses. And the BCM does not only contain cyber attacks, but other types of crises as well. Well, our electricity sector definitely can be part of those crises. Everyone has to prepare for now. But what is different here is that we have, again, the information sharing part, that as soon as we have intrusion detections, we need to share that with others so they can take measures that they look out for the same types and ways of intrusion maybe, and that we have to take account a multi-stakeholder incident response. And when it comes to supply chain security, I just picked a few. So one part, again, is risk management of the supply chain. And the supply chain, and here we have a common, I'd say, common ground, because most of electricity entities use providers and services which are cross-country, and many use the same services and providers. So this supply chain security is a form of risk management and understanding your supply chain, which needs to be cross-border anyways. What is in the idea of the NIS2 is that you should have an assessment of the various stakeholders, which means you have to have a good view on procurement and contracts, whether this has implications on your business continuity management, if one of your providers maybe is hit by a ransomware attack or any other kind of attack. And here, this is really what the NCCS focuses on, is that we have shared ICT providers, products, services, and processes, and that we have a shared evaluation, and then we can quickly let each other know if one of those is affected, that we might have a vulnerability as well. Finally, when it comes to training and education, I want to highlight the NIS2 directives implicit tasks for training and education, I would say. So there's, in my point of view, there's specific training required in the sense of procurement and the supply chain. So if you have a procurement, they really need to know about cybersecurity and risk assessment, so they can pick the right suppliers. The various business units when it comes to incident response and risk management, the IT security, if you have one, because it's no longer only IT security, but also OT security, IoT security, and all the other securities. They need to work together now. Kostas already pointed it out, the CEO has a personal liability now. So they should have very specific training, especially on the terms of risk management and understanding business continuity management for their own company. And as I stated, the crisis exercises, they play again a different role than for the NCCS, because we need to run these exercises between various stakeholders, not just within one entity, but between entities. So how can we contribute, or how do we want to contribute as an EEISAC? We want to become the reference point for information sharing at EU level. That's what we are good at. That's what we want to foster here and put out there as point of the discussion. We want to make ourselves available for best practices. Enable the DSOs and TSOs to be part of the network and harmonize information exchange and share the existing information sharing platforms we already have, for example, our Nextcloud and Mist platform, to every relevant entity. So this is a call for action. If you want to become part of our members, please reach out. You find the contact details here. It would be great to meet you soon again, and thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Gaspar, for this very interesting presentation. And now, if there are questions from the audience or online in the chat, please. Just a moment. We have one question. We'll wait for the microphone.
So hello, I hope that you can hear me.
Yes.
So I have a question regarding the information sharing that you mentioned at the end of your presentation, which was really interesting, by the way. Thank you for this. The information that you intend to share, it's only for specific communities, or you will also intend to have some kind of, let's say, a public channel for other organizations to consume this information, like, for example, like a cyber threat intelligence to use it in other solutions?
So we are very careful with cyber threat intelligence service providers. I'd have to ask the board. If you are interested, please feel free to reach out personally to me again. Generally, the European Energy ISAC is specifically meant for energy solution and service providers within the European Commission. European Union, sorry about this. So everyone who's a DSO, TSO, anything which has to do, also service providers, ICT product providers, etc., could be in there. We have some of them already in our members. We also encourage universities to be part of our members, so researchers, research institutions, so we can leverage as much knowledge as possible. So if you, for example, do threat intelligence as part of a university, that would be highly interesting to us to have you as a member, because we can then make the best of the data we get.
Okay, thank you. So basically my question stems from the fact that in, let's say, some projects, for example, like this one that we are currently at, if we want to do something concerning like the energy sector or other sectors, it often becomes really challenging to gather relevant information, even, you know, in case of a research institutions or something, it's basically close to this community. That's why. That's the main reason.
Well, it's a community of trust, right? Information sharing always is a matter of trust, because obviously once you get attacked, once you have something and you relay that, you put out there that you have vulnerabilities, that there was an attack, which might also cause some other implications, such as media jumping on it, etc., etc. So information sharing and the information sharing community should be a community of trust. So our process, if we get new members, is usually that we have a kind of vetting process. That sounds more serious than it is, but we have to get to know each other. We have to make sure that we can establish a trustful connection and that the data is safe with those liable persons. And then we can establish ways on how information is shared. There might be ways for collaboration in various ways, which is linked. So we also have connections and memorandums of understandings with other authorities, with other ISACs, for example, where we have different channels on where we exchange information. So it's not that everybody has to be a full member. So we have different levels on which we share information with each other. But it always really depends on who you are, and we need to establish a trust beforehand.
Okay, so the main idea here is that if somebody wants to, let's say, access and utilize this information, they have to first contact the relevant ISAC and
exactly.
Proceed with the necessary processes to then access and use it.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll put my contact details in the chat later on again, so you can reach out.
Okay, thank you very much. We have time maybe for one more question.
I think Sophia had her hand up, just saying.
Yes.
I'm not sure whether she's still there.
We have one more question from the audience.
Yes, it's not very okay. It's a question about the quality of data and how much, if joining the EISAC network, we can expect from such data. What's the benefit from? How would you say this?
Yes, the very idea is that we have two ways of information sharing. One is the MIST platform, which shares vulnerabilities, CVEs, according to the MITRE framework, which is kind of instantaneous and is done via the software, the MIST platform. And then we have another information sharing channel, the Nextcloud I spoke of, where we relay more detailed information, for example, about attack path, about what has happened, how it has happened, and also discussing relevant incidents for us and our sector, which is more like an open Teams channel, if you want, where we can discuss things more in detail. So it's various ways of information which we share with each other. And the main idea is, why do we do this, is really to be able to prevent attacks for the other members. So as soon as somebody gets hit somewhere and we see a certain pattern, or we see something which might be helpful for others to prevent an attack, then we can put it out there and the members get informed directly, and they can quickly check whether they have patched that specific, whether they maybe also use that specific software or hardware, whether they have not patched it yet and should do so immediately, or maybe their patch circle planned to do that in 2 weeks' time or something, but then they should do it immediately. So that's pretty much the idea, that once we put the information out there that somebody has had an attack or there is a vulnerability somewhere, everyone else can react much faster in order to prevent the same thing happening to them. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, definitely. It's absolutely interesting for us. Do you have any lessons learned from? Can you share with us just one, something that is a final point from your side?
Lessons learned from the NCCS? No, because it's just published. Lessons learned from information sharing and analysis is and I think I related to that several points. It's a very complex and critical process. When do you have enough trust in order to share delicate information? And it's really the delicate informations which are of most value to most other member organizations, right? Because this is what helps them to improve their cybersecurity. We do not have to, well, we can openly admit that nobody's perfect yet, and that we all have trouble setting up perfect cybersecurity. And it will never be 100% perfect. So it does need that very specific mindset that you really want to collaborate, that you want to share something. And I think sharing is a difficult terminology thing here, right? Because sharing seems like one person shares something and the other just receives. But the idea of the ISAC is that it's an exchange, so that everyone has to contribute and everyone can take something out of it. And I think the English language is somehow lacking the detail here, or the fine-grained details, but it's more an exchange and meant as an exchange. And I think that is really, really important, that everybody wants to contribute, and that's the biggest challenge as well, right? Many are happy to receive data, happy to analyze data from others, but sharing your own data is always, that's where you're hesitant. And this is the greatest challenge I think we face. Plus, automatizing everything and finding one of the biggest challenges I find is when is an information really useful for others, and how does it have to be tagged? How does it have to be done in a way that maybe machines can learn from it, but also maybe humans can understand what this actually means and what's happening there. So language is a barrier and an objective as well. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much from my side. Very, very useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if online there was also a question or it was answered.
Just a comment, if I may. This is Sofia Tequeredo from Netcompany Indriasoft. Thank you very much, Svandia, for your presentation and very valid points. Just for information sharing, it has been quite continuous discussion about also the information sharing policy, governance policies, who will have access to what type of information. I think the need to know stakeholders for what minimum information needs to be known is also in NIS2 and NCCS, if I recall correctly. And it is not only among the energy, for example, critical infrastructure operators, but also all the authorities, cybersecurity authorities, CERT. So indeed, this is quite important, because when indeed we detect an attack or an incident happens, timely response is necessary, and not as the Cyber Solidarity Act, I suppose, is also dictating. It is a collaborative effort. It is not an individual effort. So the information needs to be shared, the incident, all the parameters. It is sensitive information. All the need to know stakeholders need to receive the information and then together act on what needs to happen. Of course, inform all the other critical infrastructure operators for being prepared in case such an attack may happen to them as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. If I may, I would have only one final remark, and then we move forward. Also, maybe as an advocate for EISAC, do you see participation, membership in EISAC as support for the energy companies to assure some kind of regulatory compliance, so to help them through this information sharing or through the risk management policies by participating in EISAC?
Yes, obviously, our information sharing goes beyond vulnerabilities and and critical attacks. It's also about best practices sharing. It's also about finding ways of how to tackle the threat landscape, also having a good idea on threat intelligence on what's happening out there. And we share all this with each other in building trust.
Okay. Thank you very much once again, Dr. Westphal, for the interesting presentation and discussion. I will also thank once again Mr. Molinos on behalf of ENISA. And I think now we can wrap up this session. And I will give the word to Theodoros for continuing with the schedule. Thank you.